Hi, software engineers. Professor Sheriff here with a video that is kind of software engineering, but I teach other classes in software engineering, and this is going to be a video for my class on computer game design. So, for the computer game design students who are here because this is required, hi. For everyone else who is just a member of the channel and is interested in other things, you're welcome as well. So, quickly to catch everyone up, including the students who are required to watch this video, we've been doing a lot with world building. So we've been doing things like talking about how do worlds come about? Why do we create worlds for games? Trying to address players, not only the Timmies and Spikes, if we're thinking about the Magic, the Wizards of the Coast profiles, but also Vorthos, the characters that care, the players that care so much about the consistency of the world and the way that things are put together and the narrative that comes through. And world building really addresses particular aesthetics in the MDA framework, right? So world building is going to address things like narrative, obviously, or expression. Whereas when you think of character design, you might be thinking about that. You might be thinking about, oh, how am I going to build my next character in Mass Effect? Or maybe Dragon Age. The new Dragon Age is about to come out to date this video. Maybe you're thinking about Baldur's Gate. You know, you're really thinking about character design as story character. But there's more to it than just that, because a lot of video game characters are, in effect, blank templates. And what they really are just a vehicle for the player's actions in a world. Good game design is going to give players agency, going to make them make decisions. And those decisions could be something like, oh, I'm going to play a elf ranger or something like that. But it can also be Mario deciding to go up as opposed to down when there's two different paths to take. So all of that is part of character design. So quick shout out to my colleague, Professor Mark Florian, who contributed a fair number of these slides as well. Another person that teaches his class. So if you get a chance to take his class, thumbs up as well. So anyway, character design. It really is this intersection of ideas of world building and also ideas of actions and interactions. So earlier on in the semester, we talked about coming up with verbs. We talked about coming up with actions and interactions in the world. And some of that we tied in with the game loop and what does the game have to calculate whenever a player does something. But from a character design perspective, let's just look at it in kind of these two nice columns. First, we can think about world building. How does this character fit into this world? Are we building a character like something for a Persona game where there's going to be a lot of story happening around this character and maybe the player has some input into the character? Maybe the player is going to have a lot of input into the character. Maybe the player is going to make key decisions that's going to determine whether this character is good or evil or light side or dark side if we're playing a Star Wars game. Those sorts of decisions. So, how much are you trying to build towards that? And of course, those aesthetics are way more narrative or expression. But there's also there's also the aspect of character design when you're focusing around the verbs. I press a button on a controller. I have a controller and I press a button and I want it to do a thing, right? I'm mapping actions to buttons, which become procedures. And why would I choose one procedure as opposed to another? If I'm making a particular game, I'm trying to think about, okay, there's an objective that I want the player to work toward. It could be something as simple as going from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, right? Your standard 2D platformer. Okay, what do I need in order to have the player be able to get the character from there to there? Move? Jump? Are there enemies? Do I need to be able to jump on them? Do I need to be able to shoot them? You can start by building a character by basically thinking about how do you want the player to interact with the world from a challenge perspective, from a from a perspective of how are they going to work through this obstacle course. And those two different pillars don't have to be completely isolated from each other. We think about a game like Metroid, as we look through the Metroid series, there's a lot of things we think about from world building in that perspective. Um, who is Samus Aran? What is her role in the world? What are the Metroids? What are the Chozo? I mean, we can kind of talk through the lore of Metroid. And not all of that lore, but a fair amount of that lore was there from the beginning. But we also can focus on how does it feel to control Samus in those environments? How does Samus jump? How does Samus move? How does Samus shoot? And certainly that has a different feel. And certainly in the late 80s, when you were comparing Samus's movement to Mario's movement or Simon Belmont's movement, all NES games, they felt drastically different. Mario is a pretty nimble for a plumber, but jumping around, and it's really about making these intricate jumps relatively quickly. Samus is more floaty, is a word that you could potentially use for Samus's movement, particularly in the original Metroid. And thinking about very precise movement, climbing tall things, whereas Simon Belmont felt heavy. He had a very distinct jump. He had the whip. He felt more like a bulldozer almost going through. So 3 very similar games from a perspective of actions, from a perspective of verbs. Very different characters, both world building wise and also control wise. And so what we want to talk about is, well, how do we get to that point? And how does that character then interact in that environment? And what is fun in that environment? Well, it doesn't have to be fun. Games don't have to be fun, but what makes it interesting in that environment? And my number one tip, I suppose, for new game designers is start simple. I know that in your heart of hearts, you want to make the game where there's 7 different types of movement and 9 different types of weapons, plus there's vehicles, plus that's great. But really and truly, there are so many great games that the move set is like 2 things. Here's an example I use in class all the time. Game design students, go to sleep for a second. You've heard me use this. But here's an example I use all the time. What if the only verbs you had, the only actions your character had, are move left and right and flip gravity? That's it. So you have left and right and 1 button that flips gravity and then flips it back. Pretty simple, right? So you start thinking about level design around that. So maybe the first level is just literally walk from left to right, and you're teaching the player they can move. Then maybe you have a level and then there's a huge ledge and then the exit's like, up here. So then you walk this way, you flip gravity, you go over here, you flip gravity down, and then you exit. Now you do that again, except now there's blocks that move along with it. You have to kind of go through the blocks. Then you do it, and now there's spikes. Now there's a hazard. Now there's enemies that are move, and some enemies flip with gravity and some enemies don't. And then there's a switch that switches one way when gravity is one way, but switches another way when gravity is another way. You can build out so many different interesting things with the player's interaction with the world by doing good level design. And the benefit of having a small number of actions for your character means that it's way easier for a new player to pick up your game and immediately start playing it. Because if you decide you're going to map a new thing to every single button on this controller, you're going to lose them pretty quick. If they're not an experienced game player. Because they don't want to have to learn what all of the buttons do. I mean, look at some of these characters here. We have Mario, Samus, and Madeline. At their heart, it's running and jumping. Mario can shoot fireballs. Samus can shoot her arm cannon. Now the verbs change for those 2 characters, right? Mario eventually will do some swimming. Samus can do swim. Samus kind of swims, but not really. She just can't jump very well until you get a gravity. Never mind. But Mario will get new power-ups. We're thinking like Super Mario Brothers 3 gets the Tanuki suit, Frog suit, Hammer Brothers suit, the Raccoon tail. And each of those do cool and interesting things. Samus, first power-up she usually gets is Morph Ball. Be able to roll up into a little tiny ball and, be able to do other sorts of platforming in that way. Madeline's running and jumping. with the dash. So once you jump in the air, you can do a dash in a direction to get a little bit more movement. And with Madeline, we change that up by changing the world around her. There's different things that she can dash into that maybe recharge the dash or grab a platform or jump into a bubble that spits her out in certain ways. So Madeline really is a good example of how we change up verbs by changing up the level, not by changing the character. By keeping a simple move set for our characters, again, it's easier for the player to understand it. Now, no one's going to argue that Mario from Super Mario Brothers originally was inspired character world building. Now, today in 2024, the world of the Mushroom Kingdom has a lot going on there. But at the time, we'll talk about where Mario came from. Samus, there was some lore there at the beginning. Certainly the idea of the Chozo was there. Certainly Metroids were there, and the idea of the space pirates and Mother Brain, which that's a pretty good starting point for this sort of space opera. But it certainly has evolved since then. Madeline, on the other hand, there's a lot more world building there. Particularly when we think about some of the themes of Madeline, of Celeste, themes of self-doubt and self-realization. The mechanics play into that more. We see that a little bit more with modern game design. So we want to limit those verbs, make it pretty easy, try to limit it to one action per button so that players can easily grasp the game and make progress towards your goal. Hopefully you've communicated to the player what their goal is, and also you're providing good feedback so they know if they're making good progress. So I'm going to cut away from this setup right here, and we're going to jump into a few games. Specifically, we're going to look at Mario and Super Mario Brothers, Mega Man from Mega Man 3, Samus from Super Metroid, Thomas from Thomas Was Alone, and Madeline from Celeste. And let's talk about those character building environments and see how they compare. All right, starting here at, well, almost the beginning, but not really the beginning, but with Super Mario Brothers, the game that probably, admittedly, saved the video game industry in the United States in 1985 after the great crash. So, well, let's just get into it and talk about Mario here. So, Mario, actually, let's actually bring him in and pause really quick. So, Mario did not first appear in Super Mario Brothers or even Mario Brothers. He actually first appeared in Donkey Kong under the name Jumpman. Now, the interesting thing about that is that Shigeru Miyamoto, the designers, really wanted Mario to, well, the character of Mario to be a hard-working person. And so, since Donkey Kong was taking place on a construction site, he was originally a carpenter. It wasn't until Mario Brothers, which takes place underground and has those pipes. Many people haven't even played Mario Brothers. That's totally fine if you haven't. But that's when he got switched over to being a plumber. And let me actually go ahead and get a super mushroom here. Finish talking about the visual design of Mario, because it's a little easier once we have that. All right, let's get him in a good spot and pause again. Okay, so let's look at the design here. First and foremost, the thing to know about Mario's design is that it was intended to stand out from the background. So this character design right here, meant to be easier to spot, which, you know, if you look at the rest of the colors, that actually makes plenty sense. With that light blue background, the greenish color, and this is an interesting thing, you know, this is not the way you usually think of Mario nowadays, if you're in 2024. You know, this is kind of his hair is the same color as his shirt, is the same color as his mustache, is the same color as his boots, and it's this like greenish color. Now that could be color correction issues somewhat, but in general, this is what he looked like. So starting at the top, why does Mario have a hat? He has a hat, so they didn't have to draw his hair. Or animate hair, for that matter. Why does Mario have a large nose and a large mustache? So they didn't have to give him a mouth. I mean, this is part of it, right? So this is easy to draw. This is easy to represent. It flowed with the idea of Miyamoto-san saying that, well, we're just going to put Mario in New York as a plumber, and the Italian thing we're going to build on stereotypes for the nose and the mustache, and there you go. The overalls really was just it's easy to draw. I mean, this is 8-bit graphics, so they were leaning heavily on what they could do in the world. So now let's talk about verbs. So Mario has obviously walk. This is walking back and forth, and jump. So we have A is jump. Now we can notice immediately as I'm playing that there is different levels of momentum. And so I have control in the air, which let alone plumber, no human has the ability to slow their movement in midair like that. But Mario also has run. And he has a hidden block right here. Look at that. Pro tip from 1985. There's a one up there. Let's get the fire flower and add another verb, which is represented by the color change, right? So we know that new verbs are in effect because we have given feedback to the player through a visual change to our character model with a different color palette. And now we have that particular action. Now, 2 fireballs are on screen at a time at any point because that's what you can keep up with this processor and make it still keep working. Could it be more interesting if you could have just like a flamethrower? I don't know if interesting is the right word, but it does change the dynamic of the game. But with 2 fireballs, that's usually sufficient for taking out all of our friends here. Mario has an exceptionally hard head for hitting blocks, and he can even break bricks. And then we have this verb, invincibility. So again, a change in the graphical representation of Mario so that we know that something different is going on. This is an interesting bit of level design right here. I'm jumping to another lecture really quick. So right here, we have this 4 block up and then a gap and then blocks down. And why? Right? We have this, and what is it actually doing for us? Nothing. It's just here. Now, for one thing, it's kind of like if you're running in the woods and there's a little hill over the side, you do a little parkour sort of thing, feeling cool that way. That's neat. So you come up here and you made the jump, and then immediately after this, let's actually move a little bit further over. The game is like, okay, you learned how to jump over holes just back there. Do it here. Now notice one key difference here is that it's 2 blocks wide at the top to allow a player to understand that they can get a running start to get all the way across that. But anyway, back to control, back to character design. So Mario's character, and Mario's named after the landlord of the Nintendo company I think in New York at the time, but Mario Degaldi? I'm not going to get that right. You can look it up on Wikipedia later. But Nintendo has a habit of naming characters after people in real life. Kirby is named after John Kirby, who is a lawyer that worked for Nintendo. So, anyway, there's a whole joke there about lawyers and Kirby and how Kirby sucks up enemies to absorb their powers. That's a whole other character design discussion. All right, so we've got Mario here. Mario can move left and right. Mario has can increase speed by holding down the B button and jump with A. And that's all we need on this controller, right? In your standard NES controller, there's only limited number of inputs. You have the D-pad, you have A and B, you have start and select. Now in other games, Castlevania, we have an alternate weapon where you hold up and hit B, but we are keeping it very simple for Mario. We don't have a separate way of shooting fireballs from running. It's all on the B button. So the moveset is very quick to pick up. And we learn how fireballs work, we learn how movement works, we learn how to climb things, and we learn how to hit a flagpole. Because there's nowhere else to go. So you learn that particular verb at that moment. Excuse me again. So this is one of the reasons why I believe Super Mario Brothers hit the way it did. Anyone could pick it up and play it. Now, beyond that, the level design in Mario was unlike anything that was out at the time. It really, that's what made Super Mario Bros. Stand out, was the creativity of the levels and the challenges that you had to go through. But you can see here we have a very simple moveset. Makes sense. Okay, let's go to the next game. I think I can do this one without actually doing a cut, because I think the next game is Mega Man 3. Let's go over to Mega Man 3. Oh, Mega Man 2. I'll have to go find it and come right back. Okay, back. Mega Man 3. Oh boy. Such a good game. Alright, let's get right into it. So, if you've never played a Mega Man game before, they are basically, you live and die by doing this. By defeating the robot masters, you get their powers, you use their powers on other robots. So let's Snake Man is always a good place to start. All right. Whoop. Okay, I don't have to pause it. All right, let's talk about Mega Man, the Blue Bomber, also known as Rockman in Japan, which is why one of the characters is Roll in later Mega Man games. Rock and Roll, haha, you get it? You get it? All right, so Rockman right here. What is up with Mega Man / Rockman's design? First and foremost, color palette. Blue, very blue. And the blue here is again meant to make him stand out against that background. So from just a design perspective, he's always easy to spot. The helmet, the hands, it's easy to draw. I mean, it really just is. The shooting mechanic, notice that here he's left-handed, but here he's right-handed. Again, that is just to make it simpler. Because what we do is we just take the sprite and we flip it, as opposed to having any sort of true, forgive the pun, canonical, which arm his arm cannon is on. It's just easier. So the blinking there is again to kind of let you know that Mega Man is, I guess, with us. He's not fully robot. They wanted to give a little bit of human side to him, and the blinking was the give to that. Now, from a moveset, his jump is it's tighter than Mario's. I have a lot more control in midair. I can change direction a ton. There's not as much momentum. So with Mario, once you jump in the air, you can slow down, but he's still going to kind of keep going in that direction. Not so with Mega Man. Mega Man, I can go nuts. But I don't have a dash. This is, well, I have a slide. Down and A is slide in Mega Man 3, which gives you a little bit more control. So you do have another verb. And this is the first game that introduced the dash. Mega Man's 1 and 2 did not, or sorry, the slide. Mega Man 1 and 2 didn't have a slide. Let's get playing here and see how we go through here. So the enemies move faster compared to, jeez, forgot about that guy. Move faster because you have more control. So they're expecting the challenge to be a little bit different here. Come on, give me some health back. Oh my gosh. There's more verticality to Mega Man levels, so you're going to have more things like ladders. Oh my gracious. And none of them are dropping health, which is just great. So this is our first mini-boss is strong, but we have these. Now notice that the slowdown right there, this is an example of a little bit too much ambition on the Capcom designer's part. Hey, I didn't die. There's some life. That was intentional. I think that's halfway through the level. Let's keep going. New enemy. New way of interacting with it. So you learn to stop, get hit by something else. But I have a lot more control over the movement of Mega Man. So here I can do that, and I can actually slide underneath the thing that's being released. Oh, looky here. Choice. Thank you. All right. Ooh, mystery. E-tank. So now I hit start, and I have an E-tank over here. If we're going to talk about player interaction patterns, this is a difference in Mega Man 3, where the pause actually has something for us to mess with here. So has he respawned? Yeah, of course he's respawned. Just take the hits. Alright, let's keep on going. Gotta get the Snake Man. Ugh. Gotta admit, I love the music to this game. See, that's how you're supposed to do it. And then I immediately get hit. Alright, do I make this jump? Ugh. Come on. Need that. Can't jump up ladders. Alright, another new enemy. How do I take care of him? Shoot him off the ladder. Control. Now. Alright. Here we go. Let's see how I can do it. Why does Snake Man have... Alright. I showed what I needed to show. I'm not starting all the way back here. But you get the idea. Similar moveset. Movement. There's another way of shooting. But it moves faster because that's the type of game this is. Okay, I have to switch systems because now we're going to move over to Super Metroid, which is going to be pretty different from this. So I'll be right back with that. Alright, now we're back with Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. So we definitely have more inputs on this one. We have more actions and procedures for Samus to take on. So we have movement, you know, left and right movement here, right here by our spaceship. Isn't that great? And up, down, left, right. We'll also control the direction that Samus is firing. One interesting thing is by tapping down, Samus will go down into a crouch. And if I hit down again, she goes down to the morph ball. Now, this is not a fresh save. This is a save state from, I don't know. There's only like 15 minutes into the game at this point. Y is our fire button. X turns on our, at least in this case, I adjusted some of the controls. This is going to activate missiles, which is a different type of attack. Holding down A is going to be run, and then B is jump. Now, interesting thing about jump with Samus, if I'm standing still and I jump, she does kind of this, you know, high knee sort of thing, which honestly feels kind of like Mario, except jumping, gosh, how tall is that? 3 times her height? Something like that. But if I'm pressing a direction when I hit jump, she does a spin. And when you have the spin direction, it is very hard to get very precise up and down movement. And when we use the term floaty, yeah, that really applies here. So let's move forward a little bit. Now, when I hit the L and R triggers, I can adjust the angle. So you can see I'm doing this without using my left hand, which those 45-degree angles are really, really handy. Now, I want to go check out this area down here and show off how jumping can work. So if I am going to be jumping here and I do this sort of jump, a corkscrew, it's hard to get the exact control. If I'm standing still and jump, notice for these kind of smaller areas, I have a little bit more control. Use bombs to get through here. Let's go look at some other spots. Let's hold down the A button, get some speed. Pretty good. I'm going to unlock this area. You can see it's blue in the map up there, which lets us go over to here. Another opportunity to show differing verticality. Metroid certainly does a lot of this. If I go to the map, you can kind of see where this is going. Kind of head over there to Brinstar. Another interesting thing I want to point out about this map is, to jump to another topic, mental models. So in Mario and Mega Man, you arrived in the level and you started immediately heading to your right, right? Because that's the accepted mental model for a platformer, is you're always heading in that direction. Well, if you look here, I'm pointing at my other screen here. If you see Samus's ship there at the top, the pink shows where Samus has been, the blue is where Samus hasn't been. You can't go to the right. There's actually a wall there that stops you. So immediately this game breaks a mental model saying you're not always going to be going right. You got to understand you're going to be going in different directions. And that's a conscious decision. That is a moment of teaching the player that exploration is going to be part of it. So that's a key design decision here. But back to Samus's control. I have control. Oh, energy tank. Nice. And that is going to adjust her resources. So we're talking about resources available. You can now see that pink dot in the upper left showing an extra 100 life. I'm going to switch to missiles because when I'm trying to kill space pirates, I need a more powerful weapon. And so that is another way of thinking about choosing different actions for different environments. I need to pick up more missiles. Missiles are great. I also need missiles to get through those doors. This is a nothing room. I shouldn't have gone in here. We go the other end. All right, let's look at that jump real quick. Mario wishes he could jump that far. Now, part of this is the power fantasy of being Samus Aran, famous bounty hunter with cool spacesuit. But also, this game is built around those sorts of controls. Let's get down to Brinstar, because another piece of control I really want to show you. Ugh, just need to get there. Come on, Samus. Oh, I did not mean to switch to missiles. That's a little extreme. A little bit better music here, down in Brinstar. Good, I got a nice tall wall here. So I could get back up by doing a jump, and that gets me there. But I just want to kill those guys. One thing that Samus can do is wall jump. Something that becomes a staple in Mario games later on, particularly for thinking things like Mario Odyssey or Mario 64. But yeah, we even have it here. You can see when I push left, now I can't do it if I do a normal jump. If I do a straight up and down jump, I can't wall jump. I have to be doing a spin jump. And when I press away, there's that brief moment. I'm not gonna be able to pause it. There's that brief moment, you see it? Where Samus, there's a frame, let's say like 3 frames, where Samus kind of turns and puts her hand against the wall to show that there's another action that can take place. See? Do it one more time. Just like that. And let's not do that. What's interesting though is Samus's controls here, while certainly more advanced than in the original Metroid game and also in Metroid 2 for the Game Boy, still follow some pretty similar rules. The way that jumping works, the way that the gun works, her arm cannon. You can see that here we actually do have different sprites. You see that's her right arm. And here you can see that the left arm is coming across. So we do have different sprites for left and right because we have more memory. 16-bit, we can do more things with it. But the character of Samus, you know, the pauldrons, the huge shoulders, really showing what the is part of the boost package for her suit. So there's some character design elements here that are world building. There's also some character design elements here that are really about the game itself. So Super Metroid, super fun game, absolutely crucial for learning about how search action games, Metroidvanias came to be. So if you've not played it, I highly recommend it. Let's move on to Thomas Was Alone. Alright, so this is Thomas Was Alone, which is a puzzle platformer from like 2010, 2011, 2012 probably. It is easily one of my favorite games. I don't think I'd put it in my top 5, but it is fantastic. And you're going to find out why in just a minute. So actually, let's just get right into it. I'm going to start a new game, and I'm going to talk a little less because part of this is enjoying not only the music, but also the narration. So if we want to talk about story, about world building here, this is quite the example.
Thomas was alone. Wow, a weird first thought to have.
I have movement and I have jump, and that's really it.
Thomas decided to start listing his observations for posterity. 1. The whole alone thing. 2. Portals. They led somewhere. He'd yet to work out where. 3. Falling. Thomas was absolutely fantastic at falling. He was almost as good at falling as he was at observing. Okay, interesting. Thomas couldn't fall past this block. Think, damn it, think. What if there was some kind of inverted fall? Some way to... what's the word? Jump.
Like Mario, we got this intro jump here.
Worked! Thomas had solved the great inverted fall mystery.
The narration does so much here.
A big jump. But Thomas noted there was no real danger in missing it. The world didn't want him to fail here. It was pushing him, but gently. This all seemed a little dangerous. The world was not to be trusted. It was unstable, and it seemed to Thomas that it could let him down. Thomas wondered whether the portals were actually taking him anywhere. He felt like he was making progress, but there wasn't really any way to know. He seemed to be moving predominantly up and to the right, which might, or might not, be important. It might have been paranoia again, but Thomas could have sworn the world was becoming more complicated. It always seemed to be one step ahead of his skills. It had been designed.
I have a lot of control over Thomas. He's not Samus level, he's not Mega Man, he's not I guess. Not Mario, but I have more control in the air. The jump is very obvious. It feels good.
Glowing water intimidated Thomas. He didn't like it. He certainly didn't want to swim in it.
Need to get to the point where it changes a little bit.
No amount of observation or obsessive note-taking could combat that.
I didn't do that. All right, almost to next level.
A new theory. The world was training him. He could feel himself getting smarter. There was the mental list to consider. Over the minutes and seconds since his spontaneous generation, he'd become a pretty skilled jumper. He was evolving. He just wished he had someone to share it with.
Someone to share it with. Let's see how that plays out. We meet.
Chris took an immediate and deep dislike to the skinny red rectangle. Who the hell did this Thomas think he was?
So now I have control of Thomas. Now when I hit the R button, I have control. And I notice I can't Get up there. I need to bring Thomas down here so I can jump up. Get them both there.
Chris had been doing fine. He wasn't the highest jumper, but he'd held his own. He'd even been graceful at times.
So Christopher,
Not actually,
cannot jump as far.
not technically graceful. It's probably the wrong word,
But because he
fine.
is smaller,
Was
we
that
would find out
skinny
later that he
little
can
runt
go
leaping
under
about
certain
like he
things
owned
that
the
Thomas
place?
can't get to. So what you have to do is you have to be able to switch between the two characters in order to solve certain puzzles. Matter of fact, later on in the game, we will run into even more rectangles that have different jumping and size, and some can float, some can go upside down. But here's the point. This world is rectangles and squares, and that is it. So if we're thinking about character, how are we building character here? The narrator is building the character. By the time you start adding all of the more characters, and boy, they're characters, to this game, this narrator does an incredible job of giving them all voice. They have personality, and they are rectangles. So when you're thinking about character design, there is the gameplay aspect, like we have here with Thomas Was Alone, which is just simple jumping puzzle sort of stuff. It feels good, like it feels tight. I feel like I have control. I feel that Thomas does what I want it to do whenever I need it to do it. Unlike sometimes Samus, because of the floatiness of the jump, you really have to learn how the patterns work. But here, the real feel of the game comes from the narration. It's fantastic. So if you've never played it, you should do it. We got one more to do. Turn the volume down again. We are going to go over to Celeste. And there's so many good games here I could do this with. We could talk about Hollow Knight, that came up there. I mean, doing character studies on some of these is just is great. So if you're in the game design class, you've played this game, maybe other people have played it as well. The designer Maddie, fantastic, has designed some other really great games too, and also some like Super Mario World hacks. So let's get in here and let's just talk about this. I don't know which sure, it doesn't really matter. What we care about is Celeste. She has jump, she has grab, she has dash. Oh, this one has assists turned on. Does it have infinite jump? Oh, this has infinite jump. All right, so let's jump to another one. Jump to another one. Yeah, that has assists on. You can see by the wings on the side. And the reason I'm not doing that one is just because that game intentionally changes, or that the assists intentionally are done to make it so other people, so you can learn the controls. But so Celeste is all about control. So you have pretty good jump control here. You can hold down the trigger to grab onto a wall. You can dash, and then when you run into a crystal, you can dash again. So like I can dash, crystal, dash again. Well, okay. You see how that worked? Get back up here using the dash. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep using these dashes and the environmental stuff to make it further and further in the game. I'm going to grab there. Wah! All right, let's do it again. This is why I'm not a streamer. Dash up, jump, got the crystal, there we go, and we can move forward. So, you know, solid control, easy to move. The dash makes sense when I press the dash button. It is very obvious what's going on. We have feedback from the game telling me what is and is not happening. We have these cool other platforms that inform more about how we are going to interact with the world. Like this spring here. Because I touched down, it recharged my dash. Another thing that teaches us how things move. So again, I don't need to spend as much time on Celeste. But all of these games have a form of very basic move and jump with one other action thrown in there, and they're very different. They're very different games, even though they're very similar control schemes. So when you're thinking about character design, you're thinking about how do you teach the player how to interact with the character, how to teach the player to be the character, and then how to have that character work in the world. So let's jump back over to the slides really quick and let's have some final thoughts. So really quickly finishing up here, you gotta think about the feel of your character and figure out what those verbs are, what those actions are that you want your character to have in the world. Are they necessarily going to be, like 70 different actions? I hope not. I hope that you're really thinking about what you can teach the player to interact with in a short amount of time, what works well in the world that you're trying to build. Sometimes the character, the world building informs the actions, and sometimes the actions inform the world. And just think about how those things work together and consider those examples we just looked at. And then how are you going to map it to a controller? How are you going to give your player something that meets their mental model for how things should work in a game? So think about how this works. Think about the states that your character is going to be working in. If it helps to break it down to a state machine and then, code the different aspects of it, by all means do that, and then put it all together. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed watching those few games. Hopefully the volume on some of them wasn't too crazy, but let me know if you are not in the CS47 learning class and enjoyed this video. 4730 students, I'll see you back in class next time. Thanks. Bye.